This is a video about Dynamics 365 automation with the user interface and automatic documentation generation of your Dynamics application. One of the things that holds folks back with using automation is the expense of creating the automation itself. A lot of folks will default to manual testing, which really doesn't work for a continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline. So this video is basically to discuss how to make it easier to get that automation and also how to leverage the tools that you're going to use to get there throughout your development process. So the first slide here I have is around the tools that are used to get there. And first of all, we're going to describe our Dynamics user test scenarios in a Gherkin syntax. And this allows us to define a domain-specific language for specifically Dynamics 365 that business analysts and product owners can utilize to create their own user test scenarios. And then that is actually translated by SpecFlow into C# functions, which can be mapped to any particular code that you would want. In our particular example, we're going to map it to Selenium, which allows us to drive a browser and make it automate and do things. For example, if we say log into Dynamics, we have a specific method that goes and logs into Dynamics. So any business user can say the first step of their test is go log into Dynamics. Microsoft's also provided another library called EasyRepro, which is basically specific to Dynamics, and it's a Selenium automation of Dynamics. So a lot of the work that you would have to do to write those tests is already done for you. And then at the lowest layer here is the actual Selenium execution, which can target a number of different browsers: Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Edge, Opera, and others. So what are the advantages of using this approach? Well, first of all, I've already mentioned it, but business analysts and product owners can describe user test scenarios in English type language. In our case, a domain-specific language for Dynamics 365 to do things like log into Dynamics, navigate the ribbon, navigate the UI, load forms, fill out fields, execute saves, and all your various CRUD operations that you do as part of your testing. So you create, retrieve, update, delete. And then your investment that you're making by your analysts and product owners can be used for your developers as part of your story for acceptance criteria to accept those stories after they've been built, for testers to generate automated and manual testing. And you can describe your tests and make them not automated. So if you have particular tests that you want to do like a secondary regression testing, that's a manual. You can also do that. And then automatic documentation generation, which I'll show you as well. And this one's very important. Just maintaining the current state of your system and all the current screens and the particular steps. I'll show you how to automate that so it all happens automatically. So what is this Gherkin thing we're talking about in these statements? So it's really a combination of given, when, and then statements. And you can think of it as given is kind of the setup for your scenario. The when is when an action takes place. And then a then is what you're expecting to happen after the action. So what might this look like for actual Dynamics? This is an example of a contact create. User logs in Dynamics, navigates Dynamics, clicks new on the ribbon, fills out some fields, clicks the save button, the form reloads, and then we can validate the email address entered was the actual one that was saved. So we translate that into actual C# statements using Cucumber, which is actually for .NET. It's called SpecFlow, but it's the same thing. And then that will get translated, the actual definition of our C# functions of what we want to do when we say log into Dynamics. In our particular case, we want to automate a browser. So whatever browser that might be that we're targeting, Firefox, Chrome, Edge, IE, Safari, Opera, whatever. We can write the code within that method, but like I said, Microsoft's kind of already done the work for you. So there's a project out there called EasyRepro, and here's the CRM functionality covered. As you can see, there's quite a bit that is covered already. Navigation, obviously, filling out fields, ribbons, subgrids, all that kind of stuff's already covered for you, which will be the majority of your testing. So back to our example here. This is an example of how it actually executes. So let's take the first statement. Given a user logs into Dynamics, I'm kind of break it down as to how that looks. So it's a text message, essentially in the file. It's just a text file. So it's given user logs into Dynamics. Okay, well, how does that end up being in a browser automation? It's because that the SpecFlow actually gives you regular expression parsing. So you can, in this particular case, it's an exact match of user logs into Dynamics. But you can also use variables, which I'll kind of show you in the next example. So this next example, I'm actually navigating the area and sub-area. So I'm navigating to sales and then to contacts. So you can see how using this syntax right here, sales and contacts are passed in as variables to my navigation step, which in case I'm calling EasyRepro to basically open a sub-area of the area and sub-area. So what may have been, 20 or 50 different XPath statements to parse XML document object model of a browser and cause it to do things, they've actually done the work for you. It's just one method call. So you can see how this translates to be pretty simplistic. So I'll show a few more examples and then I'll show a working demo. In this example here, a user clicks the ribbon button, and the ribbon button is a variable. It's passed in as button name, and button name gets passed to a single execute here for a click command. And you notice I use it both in the when and given context. So you can actually have two different regular expressions that map to the same executable code. And then here's an example of filling out a form field. Um, user enters first name and last name of type full name. And that basically what I'm looking for is a repeatable expression that I can map to different data types. So that's why I have to include what kind of field it is. But essentially, those two parameters, first name and last name, are passed in as variables to my function, and then what the actual field's called is also passed in. I construct essentially an array of fields, and I pass it in and set it. And here's a simpler example where I'm basically filling out a text field, a string field. So I'm going to enter some information into a field called email address 1, and it's a string. So by knowing it's a string, I know that all I have to do is call set value. The first thing I pass in is the email address. The second thing is the actual field name, and those get passed to, again, just a single line of code. The EasyRepro is doing a lot of work for us in these examples. And here's a validation. So at the very end, I want to validate that I go and read the screen, and the value that I've passed in and saved is the actual value I get from the screen. And the way I do that is a get value statement. Again, I have the thing I'm looking for and what it should be, and I just do an assert to see if they're equal. So how does all this look in practice? So this is Visual Studio. Here's the actual test scenario, same one I just showed you. It's not color coded, but you get the idea. And what happens is, as you edit this, there's a code behind that's actually getting changed. So you can see that the code actually contains the statements themselves, and what's happening is it creates events. So it's going to create a given event, for example, and also a given event, a when event, a then event, and it's going to pass these strings to the SpecFlow engine behind the scenes, which is going to map to specific methods. So here are my specific methods. So I've basically created, given regular expressions that map to certain functions, when, and then there'll be a then here at the bottom. So then. You can see those all map to very little code. In fact, most of them are just single method calls. So I'm actually able to do quite a bit with Dynamics here with just one-line statements. Logging into Dynamics, navigating Dynamics, filling out virtually any field on the form, reloading the page from the ribbon, and then comparing fields on the screen. So what does this look like when you're executing? So let's just execute this test, for example. It's going to run. It's going to have because this is an evaluation mode of SpecFlow, it's going to put a default timeout that shows 14 seconds. It's usually somewhere between 5 to 15 seconds or so. Obviously, if this were a registered version, it wouldn't do that, but obviously you could turn that off. It's going to go ahead and log into the application. I'm going to see it navigate the site map. It's going to go to sales, contacts. It's going to create a new contact. And as you see, Chrome says it's being controlled by automation software. So this is all Selenium code. Very little Selenium code, in fact, because you saw that our SpecFlow statement mapping to the functions, you saw most of it was just one function that EasyRepro has provided us for Selenium automation. So it's just basically playing through all the fields, filling out each field. It's going to end up saving this contact at the end, and then it's going to compare the value that it thinks it should have versus what it actually has, and it will tell us if it passed the test or not. So it did pass. So also, behind the scenes, you can see that the test succeeded there. Also behind the scenes, it was creating documentation. So this is just a document file here, Word document that it created for us for that test that just executed. This is what it looks like. It's got the feature, it's got the description of the feature, the scenarios, each step of the scenario, and it took a screenshot for each step. This is a very useful tool for creating documentation if you have a new business analyst coming on your project and you want to take them through the critical flows of your application. You definitely can do that. You can also enhance this however you would like to make it more meaningful for your specific use case. But this is just an example of how you can do automation with Gherkin files and SpecFlow and EasyRepro and Selenium, and also produce documentation. Give your developers the added benefits of being able to use these for your testing purposes, for acceptance criteria. And it enables your product owners and business analysts to be part of the process. So thank you for your time.